Good afternoon. We're glad that you guys could join us today. So this is Boyer & Associates webinar on an introduction to the Professional Services Tool Library, specifically in Dynamics GP. Just a couple quick notes that I had for you. I want to let you know that you are on mute. However, Ron is totally open to questions throughout. So if you do have any questions, you'll notice on your control panel that there's a little question box. Go ahead and type that in there and we will get to that as soon as we can through his presentation. And then also, you will be getting a recording of this webinar, so you don't need to worry too much about taking a whole bunch of notes or trying to remember everything for other people at your company who might be interested. You'll get a copy of it, you can share it with them and all that. So, just wanted to tell you a little bit about Boyer & Associates. If you're not familiar, we've been around for about 24 years. Founded in 1994, based in Plymouth. So here's a little bit about us. One of our newer ERP products is Dynamics 365 Business Central. If you have not already heard of that one, it is Microsoft's new cloud-based product. So that's kind of fun. And then also several of our services. And kind of a new arena for us is that we're focusing a little bit more on the report development side. So working with BI 360 and Jet Reports to help you be able to create even better reports. Making businesses better. This is what Boyer & Associates is all about. And to us, it's much more than a slogan. It's something that we actually talk about as a team and try to make sure that we are consistently doing this for our clients. Our core values spell out team. They are trust, effort, attitude, and meaningful relationships. And again, those are something that we talk about on a weekly basis and try to make sure that we are putting all those into practice so that we are making businesses better for our clients. So today you are going to be hearing from Ron Pedersen. He's one of our GP consultants and kind of one of our resident experts on the PSTL library. So go ahead, Ron, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you. So just throw presentation over to me and then we'll get going. There we go. Okay, each year at our annual client event, we often do a session on GP tips and tricks, and Professional Services Tools Library was one of the ones we did here recently. But in general, on a broad basis, we do these tips and tricks because our goal is to help you become get more out of your Dynamics GP system. And we'll do that. Let's see here. Quick. It's not updating here. Just a moment. There we go. And we do that by introducing new things or reminding our clients of things maybe they may have forgotten about their system, and really trying to get you to think in new ways about your system. So oftentimes, as we present different topics, it may apply to you directly, or it may not, but I encourage you to really try to understand what we're presenting because it may help you think again in different ways about your system. Like, oh, if they can do that over there, what about my need over here? Could something maybe be configured differently or change? In fact, quite frankly, one of the secrets here of being a good consultant is just seeing and experiencing a lot of things, and so that, that's one of the ways we can help clients along, with things. So let's see. So again, the piece that we'll be looking at today is this Professional Services Tools Library. Is a group of tools and enhancements to your GP system. It is available to all users. It's not something that you have to go out and purchase. It's been available for a number of years. So if you're relatively current with your GP version, this tool set is available to you. It's also referred to here, as you can see, as PSTL, or the Pistol Tools. A little bit easier to say than Professional Services Tools Library. So if you hear me continuing to refer to the Pistol Tools, you'll know what I'm referring to. It does require a separate installation, and we're not going to be covering that in our presentation here today, but if you are interested in seeing how to do that and getting information, you could do a search for Boyer Pistol install as shown on the screen there, and we do have a blog session that's that you would find as your first hit for that. And once it is installed and you've got it active on your system, you'll need to set up potentially set up some security tasks and roles if other users are going to use the system. In some cases, you do need to be logged in as the SA user to be able to use some of the tools. And generally, because of the powerfulness of this tool set, we generally require or recommend you be logged in as SA anyway, as you're working through the and using some of these tools. And again, SA is just the login, and you'd need to have the password associated with it. SA stands for the system user, and it's a special SQL user that's available to you in GP also. So one of the most important things with regard to using this tool set is backing up your system. You should be sure to have a backup of all the databases before running any of the tools within this library, because these tools will change your data in significant ways, and there's really no undoing the change that you would do. So if something happened to crash in the midst of it, and that's generally not the case, or it does something you didn't expect, your only option really at that point is to restore from a backup. So very, very important. Do be sure that you're taking that backup. This is the Professional Services Tools Library, and I'll be showing you this in GP also. So I'll be going back and forth between GP and some of these PowerPoint slides, but it is as indicated, a library, or as the name indicates, a library of different tools that you have access to. And you can see it's broken up into certain categories like financial tools, purchasing tools, inventory tools, etc. And we're going to kind of talk briefly about all these and what they, how you could potentially use them. Let's see here. The first tool that we'll talk about, or the series we'll talk about, is the financial tools. And the account modifier is one of the first tools that we'll look at in the system. And it allows you to change an account or a range of accounts to a new account number. So when you first got on Dynamics GP, you spent a lot of time kind of reviewing your accounts and scrubbing and cleaning them up, and you may have had a number of accounts in a nice consistent order within your chart of accounts structure. And over time, you or others have added other accounts, and maybe they've gotten out of sequence or potentially even misnumbered in some other way. This tool allows you to take that miscoded item and renumber it. And when you do in the system, you're not losing any history. It's as if it always existed in that mode. And with this tool, along with many of the others, other users will need to be out of the system because it's making major changes and updates in and throughout many of the tables within the system. So in this one, I have indicated it does require to be logged in as SA to be able to do it. Let's take a quick look at this. So here I'm in Dynamics GP, and the Professional Services Tools has been installed, and I've got a shortcut on my home page area here on the left. You can see Professional Services Tools Library. If you're not seeing it and you go through and you do the install on yours, I can show you just a little bit about it. You'd need to build a shortcut to that tool set, and then you do so by over here in the left, right clicking with your mouse, go into add a window, and when this comes up down under here, there'll be Technical Services Tools. If you expand that and go under the project area, you'll see this link for Professional Services Tools Library. If you click on that, it says here's what the name of the link will be, the shortcut, and you would add, and then it will add it into your menu as it is over here. I'm not going to do it because I already have it, but by clicking on it, it does pull up this window, which we saw in the PowerPoint. And under Financial Tools here, we have the Account Modifier Combiner. By just clicking this radio button, and when you hit the next button, it'll come to the next window. And the next window will always be whatever you've selected on this screen. So Account Modifier Combiner, we click Next, and it opens this window. Now there's a couple or several different ways we can really use this window. In its simplest state, if we hit the lookup here, you'll see your whole chart of accounts that you can scroll through to select the account that you want to change. In this case, you can see Cash in Bank Canada ends in a 01, where all the rest end in 00. If that was one I wanted to change because it got entered in and some transactions got posted to it, I really can't delete it at that point because there's history. But if I select it in here, I'd be able to come to this window, come in and give it a new number. In this case, I'm doing it where I'm changing the 01 to the 00. After I hit the convert and it makes that change, it'll be as if all the history and everything moves over. It'll be as if it had always been that that number ending in 00 rather than 01. Now the other way that, and so this is doing it on a one-by-one basis. The other thing you can do is come in here under range, and then you've got all the various segments. So what it's showing here now under field type is this is each segment in my chart of account structure. So if you've got 4 segments, it'd be showing you all, 4 segments. If you've got 5 segments, it'd be showing that. But in this case, it's department's my first one, the main account is the second, and the sub account is the last 2. If I selected sub account here, I could then come in and say, change all 01s to 00s. So rather than doing just this one account, any place it found it within the account structure would make this change. Now, keep in mind, if I had also a 1101-01 and a 110100 already, and there was activity in both those accounts, and I ran it in this way, it would take and it would combine the activity from this account into that other account that already existed. So this tool can be used not only to modify, but also combine. Another way of saying that is if I were to go back here to the single account and I selected this Cash Canada, you can see right here, if I put in as the account to modify that to, if I put in 110200, it would take all that activity from this account and put it into this Cash and Bank Australia. So Australia would be made up with the combination of all that activity, and this 01 account, 110101, wouldn't exist anymore. So that can also be helpful if, a couple people set up a couple of different accounts, expense accounts or something like that in your chart of accounts. You said, yeah, we really shouldn't have the 2 accounts. you would have the ability to merge the activity and be left with just the one account. And as you can imagine, once that's merged, there's no way of really resplitting it out. So if you didn't get the results you'd want, you'd have to go back and restore from a backup. This also has the ability to import from a file and bring this in. So there's a validate button here, and by selecting that validate button, it allows us to go out. It opens a browser allowing you to go and try to attempt to find the file you want. And here I've got one called account modifier. If I were to select that one, it went in very quickly, it reviewed it and validated whether I've got good accounts in there. If I hit OK, it'll come up with an invalid account list. So if I happen to type in some accounts that don't look right or that aren't valid in the system, it would be listing this out. So you'd want to always keep re-evaluating until your list is clean. So just to show what I've done here is under Excel, I created a very simple list. One of the first column includes the existing accounts. The second column is what I want that account converted to. So look through and do each one of these one by one. In addition, if I had listed one of these accounts multiple times over here, in other words, convert 1102 to 110211, convert 1103 to 110211. So if I kept repeating that 110211, it would attempt to merge that activity into that account also. So once you do this simple Excel list, you just save it to a text tab delimited file, and that's the easiest way for GP to review that, and that's the one you bring in. Now, I'll just close this. So you'll see on a variety of these tools, you will have the ability to do one record or an import and do a variety of them. So the way that works is just the way I've explained it here. Okay, so I'm not going to go through and run the convert at this point. I'll just close right out. Okay. So that's the account modifier combiner. Very powerful. Then there's also a checkbook modifier. In a similar way, you might have a variety of checkbooks within your system. Maybe you had set up some activity and you really you had some checkbook IDs and you didn't really like the way you named them, or they were working well for a while, but now you've opened another location, and rather than just calling it Wells Fargo, and because if that office has a Wells Fargo also, you could have it could be the city name, Minneapolis-WF for Wells Fargo, along with Fargo-WF, Wells Fargo. So you could change the IDs of checkbooks if your business needs to support that type of change. So a very simple window, again, selecting the one, putting it in what you want to have it changed to, and then you also have, if you've got a number of them you need to change, you can do it in a list with that validate, import, etc. Okay, let's see here. All right, the next financial tool is a fiscal period modifier. And what this does is it allows you to change your fiscal periods in your system, even if some of those are within closed periods. And where this typically is used is, let's say you're on a calendar year basis and you're looking to change, and you might have a short stub year or something, but you want to change to a fiscal year basis. And if 2017 was calendar year and you had a short year, maybe it's the end of June this year, that was 2018, and it ended in end of June. Then from July to the next end of June is your next fiscal year. Well, you'd have 2017 for last year, your short year would be 2018, then the next year would be um, potentially 2019. Sometimes you can get out of sync in terms of how you want those years to end. This tool will allow you to go back and reset some of those so that you're ending in the particular, your fiscal year name corresponds to the year ending date that you've got. Be very careful with this tool, because if you come in here and you think, yeah, just take a look at it, once you hit this setup periods button, it really goes to your fiscal period table and wipes everything out, allowing you to start from scratch in terms of setting those up. Now, as it indicates in here, it doesn't support changing for closed periods a month or day ending date that it would close on. So don't attempt to go back and change years that ended in December back to a June ending type date, but it allows you to reset what those years, the year stamp on some of those closed years. Okay. The next tool, GL Master Triggers. And what this allows you to do is, if you've got multiple company databases within your organizational structure, and you're saying, you know, I've got multiple ones, but I want to keep my account numbers pretty much in sync, it allows you to set up a master database. So in this case, it'd be two. And then if you had some other companies out there, and anytime you would add a new account to that master database, it would automatically take and add that record and replicate it to your other company databases. And you're able to control that by saying which is my master and which companies do I want that to replicate or propagate over to. So you have the choice of when that is going to happen. Now, the one thing is, though, you have to be careful that as you're making deletions and things like that, not everything is going to go across, but the simply of adding and creating new accounts will be copied over to the databases you choose. There's a modifier for customer names. So you might have you know, customers in your system that wind up changing their name, and you want to have that reflected not only going forward, but maybe historically back to all the transactions that have been entered and saved and in your history tables. This particular tool will allow you to do that, where you would select that customer number, it would show you their current name, and you're able to put in a new name and have that propagate out either on a one-by-one basis or by importing those all from a list. And so now we're moving into some of the sales tools. And one of those is an RM master triggers. And what this is really allows you to, you know, I'm out of sync here a little bit. This allows you to update customers from one database to other databases within the system. Sorry, the PowerPoint is a little misleading. It's not really changing the name. It's propagating those customer records from one database and copying those into others. So it's a trigger that gets set on a master, and you define which other databases you want that copied over to. RM transaction unapply. So within GP, when you've got invoices out in the system and you might have credit memos or returns or obviously cash receipts, and you apply those cash receipts to a transaction. You do have some ability to go in and maybe remove those or delete them potentially even, but that's harder to do. In fact, they're not really allowing you to do that once it's been those transactions moved into history. And we do suggest customers run the utility paid transaction removal to move transactions off into history, to remove it from your open status into a history status. But once it does that, if the customer then contacts you, or for whatever reason you've determined you've applied the transaction to the wrong document and they really want you to apply it to a different document, you can use this utility to go through and unapply that type of transaction. So let's go take a quick look here at what we mean by this. So coming back in here under the sales tool, RM transaction on apply. So I select that radio button, hit next. It opens up for us the window. I'm able to go through and select a customer, like in this case, Adam Park Resort. I really don't need to see things other than my history ones in this case. So I'm going to go look just at my history transactions. And as I look down here, I can see I've got one here that's a return, and maybe that we've learned has been applied incorrectly. If I uncheck this apply button here under the applied here for that return, it pops up, opens a window, pops up a window. It says, are you sure you want to apply the documents? And in this case, rather than saying unapply, I'm just going to say, give me a report only. I just want to see kind of what's happening here. And as I do that, it's now saying, oh, do you want to unapply one or all levels? Let's take a look at, we'll look at each option here. If I say one payment and look at the screen, it's taking that return, it's finding what invoice it was applied to and says, I'll go ahead and unapply that return from that invoice. So there's two documents involved, the invoice and this return. Otherwise, if I come back in here and try to do it again and just say report only again, if I say unapply all, now what the system has done is it's looked and it's found that return and it's found that invoice. But see, this return was only $499.57. It was applied to a larger invoice. There was also a payment that was applied. Unapplying all, in this case, is affecting three documents. It's unapplying these two from it and making that invoice become available then if we ran it. These two documents don't go away. They allow you to reapply them in a different manner. So a nice, powerful tool to help you do that also. Okay. Transaction unapply. And another sales tool, and this is the salesperson modifier. So we have a lot of little modifier tools within the system. This allows you to take a salesperson ID and give it a new ID. So you may have salespeople in there and maybe their IDs were related to their initials and someone got married or changed their name somehow and you want their ID to reflect what their new name is. This allows you to change those IDs in the system as if it always exists. In other words, no loss of data or anything having to be re-entered. SOP customer item lookup. So this is, if you're using sales order processing, this can be a quite powerful little tool, and I would recommend you seriously look at putting it on, and I'll show you a little bit more information about it. But it allows you to store in an easily accessible manner right off the sales order entry screen what that customer has bought from you, when, and at what price. So in doing so, you enable the tool from the Professional Services Tools library. Next, you would go on and you have to create, it's creating new table structures for you. And then off of the sales order processing setup window, under the additional menu, there's this create initial data or create initial lookup data. You'd click that button and it will go through all your history and try to populate that screen so it's easily and readily available to the window. And depending on how long you've been on GP and how much activity, you might have to plan that this could take more than just a few minutes, depending on how much you've got there. So let's take just a quick look at what this can do for us. So I'll minimize this under sales here. If we go to sales transaction entry, and if I go, here's an order, let's see, grab an order in the system. Here's one for Aaron Fitz. So if I'm in here entering different items within the system, I can go up here under, I have to see, historical lookup. And right here, it pops open a window showing all the various items they've sold, what their unit of measure is, the quantity, what date that was, and how much they paid for it. Maybe they're looking at buying another phone system from us. So put in your phone. I can do a search. Here's all the ones they've purchased in the past. Here's what they paid for it at that time. And you even have the ability to select one of these and go back to drill right back into an inquiry screen of the historical inquiry back to that invoice. Excuse me. So very, very nice being able to do that right off the window, so you can use it as a reference point. It could be, because the customer might be asking what they bought last time, or you may be referencing it for what price they actually paid. Okay, close this. Let's jump back here again. Customer item lookup. Territory modifier, another modifier tool, allows you to change that ID of that territory to a new ID. Maybe you've restructured it. Instead of north and south and east and west, it might be by, maybe the north is now really northeast or something of that nature, or just Minnesota, etc. So allows you to select a territory and give it a new territory ID. Territory combiner. So the first one was allowing you to modify one. This allows you to combine a couple of territories or one territory into an existing territory. Again, no loss of work, open, or historical records. The next one here, SO PO number check. So on your sales order processing transaction entry screen, of course, you do have the ability to do quotes, orders, invoices, returns, back orders, etc. And you can, through this tool, decide whether you want to check and validate customer PO numbers that they're providing you. So you may have a need where you're saying, for quotes, we really don't need maybe a customer PO number really isn't required, but we will still want to check the database for it and check whether it's in history or just in other quotes, etc. So you're able to, in a very granular manner, tell the system when we want to check for customer PO numbers. So what you do on orders may be different than invoices, etc. You can define what type of warning you want to use, and whether it is actually required in the system or not as a required field. Okay. Inventory site combiner. Another one of those modifier tools allowing you to combine multiple sites. Why might you do that? Well, maybe you for a while had some inventory in a, you know, an extra extended warehouse that was down the block or across town or something for a while, and you no longer needed that warehouse. You're going to close it down. You're going to move everything back into your main warehouse or site. Rather than doing individual transfers and things, you could move all of that in one fell swoop by saying, combine this site with our main site. So it allows you to do that without any loss of data. And then of course we have a site modifier too, allowing you to, again, change those IDs in the system. As you know, when you create and establish an ID for a customer, vendor, employee, a site, anything like that, once you're often able to change names and things of it, but not that ID. It's an indexed record. These tools allow you to go in and make changes and update those IDs that are in the system also. Description modifier. So you can select an item number. It's going to show you what the description is. You're able to edit that description, and some of these things you can do right within an inventory card, but then it's just updating that description anytime it's used going forward. This will go back and update everything historically also. So powerful. And you also have an inventory item combiner. Again, being able to take all the history of one item and combine it into another. Sometimes you may have different versions and stuff, and you've split that out. Well, this allows you to now pull it all back together. Or if someone accidentally set up a slightly wrong item number and someone set up the correct one and you've been doing transactions with both, this allows you to combine those into one transaction with all their relative history combined also. Again, requires SA to be, you need to be logged in as SA to be able to run the utility. Being able to renumber items within the system. So just like all the other things we've talked about here recently, your numbering sequence may have changed, or you may have come up with a new scheme and things, or someone just put in a transaction or created a record and didn't do it quite right. You're able to renumber that item, maintaining all the history. There's also a tool for the item reconciler, and you have that as a utility in your system also. The help and support associated with this tool goes to suggest that this will probably run faster than the reconciler that's within utilities, that will only reconcile the items that it finds that it needs to reconcile. Quite frankly, I don't know how it determines that, but that's the documentation behind this. Now, there is no ability to select a particular item or a small range of items. If that's the case, you'd want to use the tools within the system. If I jump right over here real quickly. So in inventory, under utilities, you have a reconcile screen here where you can select a small range of items. if that's what you're going to do it just on a particular item, I would suggest this. Otherwise, if you're going to do it en masse, then that other tool may work better for you. So you might wonder, well, why do I need to reconcile? Well, occasionally, if you're suspecting that your quantities, the summary records aren't really in sync for some reason with some of your detail records, this tool may be helpful to get those back in sync. 1099 modifier. I think this kind of goes, well, it says it can update 1099s for vendors that weren't originally set up as a 1099 vendor. I would say this tool has been outdated. The utilities that you've got in purchasing, since GP, is it 2015 or thereabouts, are better than this, and I would generally suggest using those tools. It gives you a little bit more flexibility than using this particular one. But it was in the list, and I wanted to let you know a little bit about it. PM master triggers. This allows you to add that vendor and the vendor address record from your master database and have it propagate out to other databases within your system. So if you've got, again, multiple companies within or multiple companies that are in separate databases in your system, and you're trying to say, you know what, when I add a vendor to whichever my master company is, I want that same vendor to be available to me in the other databases without having to go in and re-enter that vendor again and again. This would be the tool for you, and allows you to identify which databases should be updated. Some purchasing tools, PM minimum check. So on those tools, if you wound up selecting it, another option becomes available to you. Let's see here. I think another screen. When you're doing a check batch, under the additional menu, you are able to set what that minimum check amount should be. So let's go over, we'll talk a little bit further on it, but let's take a quick look. I'm using GP 2018. And in here, under transactions, they've renamed the menu option. Instead of edit check batch, it's build payment batch, because really you're building a batch of payments, which could be EFTs, credit cards, or checks. But I open up the build payment batch window, and now on the top it's telling us, hey, the minimum check is $10. Under our additional menu, there's the option to set minimum check amount. You can turn it off, say, don't do this, or if you turn it on, you can specify what that minimum check could be. So if you select a range of checks, it's going to try to build an internal payment number for it. And if you've got some very small invoices for a particular vendor and it doesn't reach your minimum, it's going to remove that payment from the batch. Keep those vouchers out there till you've got more to be combined to hit that minimum. Now, one thing to be aware of is it will interrupt, so it will build the payments as normal. Then there's a little process that goes to say, hey, are any of these checks below our minimum? If so, it removes them from the batch. So you can have an interrupt in your payment number sequence, not your check number sequence. You haven't assigned a check yet, but that payment number sequence could have a break in it if it's removing that check from the system. You know, I don't know if your auditors would sort of like that. They're probably looking more at the check numbers, but just be aware that there could be a break in that process because it's gone ahead and removed it. Okay, oops, let me go back to here. And then the next tool is a select checks combiner. And what this allows us to do is to consolidate checks in that billed payment batch so that you're only issuing potentially one check for a vendor. So if you've got a situation where when you're building your checks, you do a variety of ranges. So I'm going to do customers A through N, and then you build your checks from there. And then I want to do invoices between this range and that range. And so if you do multiple selections and you keep adding to that batch, some payments, some vouchers for the customers, or I'm sorry, for the vendors could be selected under different rounds, and you would actually build a payment for each round that you go to build the checks. So for a particular vendor, they could wind up getting 2 checks. With this feature in place, it's going to go through and combine those. So if it finds that vendor's there, it's going to continue adding the new vouchers that it's selecting to the current payment that's in there for that vendor. Okay. And we have another modifier for the vendor name. Again, select a vendor, shows you the name, then you're able to put in a new name and then propagate that to all history and open and work transactions. And you can do that through an import also. Item minimum PO. Okay, so within GP, if you've got multiple users out there and you're creating POs, purchase orders, and different receipt numbers, someone may start creating one. You get out of this, you go into the system, you start creating one. Someone goes and kind of deletes the one that they're starting to work on, comes back, and you can have these gaps, and it can keep skipping around with respect to these PO numbers. This tool allows you to go through and provide a starting number, and it will try to look for gaps. If it doesn't find any, then it'll take the next number in the sequence rather than standard GP functionality, always grabbing the next number. So we'll try to keep your sequence a little bit more filled out so you're not having the gaps in the numbering sequence. Pop cost defaulter. So typically the last invoice cost is what will show up on a purchase order, which defaults in from that item vendor type of combination. If you would rather have it pull a standard cost that you define for the item, or standard cost, or whatever the current cost is, you're able to define that with this tool and override the standard GP functionality. And then there's also some payroll tools within the system. There is that you can enable right from the tool. There's a certified payroll report. And what this allows you to do is capture some information in the payroll area and screens, allowing you to define a project number that potentially the employee was working with or is trying to assign some of their hours to. So again, it adds that project number to their hourly transactions. and it shows you, has the ability to print and view transactions on a weekly report. In order to have that window, one of the things you'd have to do is under the alternate modified forms and reports is for the various reports IDs that you might have out there, go in and select the product, the Technical Services Tools product, and for the window, tell the system to use the new Technical Services Tools window for certified payroll rather than the standard GP window to allow you to enter some of that information. And then to be able to, so it'll be capturing it, but then to be able to run the report, you'll need to create a shortcut to that report, and that would be just like we did the shortcut for the Technical Services Tools. You would right click on that left pane, selecting a new report window, and then say go down to the Technical Services Tools. Underneath that, after you expand it, you'd select payroll and then certified payroll report, and that gets added as a shortcut, which would take you to this window, allowing you to run that particular payroll report. You also have a modifier for the employee IDs. So again, employees are set up by their initials or an abbreviation of their name or something like that, and their name changes, you may indeed want to update that employee ID. Some miscellaneous tools. Here's one for fixed assets, being able to change fixed asset IDs. And here's a tool that updates both the sales and the purchasing side. And when you're in the system, let's see, do I have one more? Nope. When you're in the system and you're adding something to the inventory side, let's go ahead and take a look at that screen. I'll take it from the sales side, transaction entry. If you're entering an order or an invoice and you happen to type in a non-inventory item here, it may just by default just accept that non-inventory item and then allow you to enter the information. But if you're typing in an item that doesn't exist, maybe you want the system to ask you, do you want to add this as an item? Rather than just assume that it's going to be just a non-inventory free-form item. You've always had that option under options, but typically it's unchecked. So it just allows you to enter a non-inventory item, and it's just going to assume it's a non-inventory item. By default, you can have this checked with that option. So anytime you open this window, it'll be checked by default, and it'll prompt you whether you want to add it or not. If not, then it assumes it's a non-inventory item and that you don't want to necessarily set it up in the system. Okay, getting close to the end here. Another miscellaneous tool. This is one I would recommend strongly that you seriously consider adding into your system. This is the doc date verify. It will perform a check to determine whether that date is in a valid fiscal period or whether that fiscal period is closed. This can be particularly helpful in the AP area. You do really have the ability, if you're fat fingering it and you think you're entering 2018 and you enter 2028, it'll likely accept that, and that document could be aged and put way out there in 2028. You can almost lose it. And GP is really not validating for that particular future date like that. What this doc date verify does, when you turn it on and enable it, it will validate those dates against your fiscal period table. So pick up your pen, make a note for yourself now to probably have this one added into your system. Okay. Decimal place tool. We've got a few customers that have, for reasons of inventory and purchase and rounding and stuff, have increased their number of decimal places that they want in their system. Well, this begins to look a little funny on checks. And what this tool does is it helps to truncate your checks down to 2 decimal places. And it does this, and truncating that down to 2 decimal places is something you can and still will need to do for the number right in the report writer for your check. You can go in and say, okay, this field should be rounded to the 2 decimal places. But when your check prints out the words and what it's going to show, the check amount in words, you have no way of modifying that from the report writer standpoint. You need this tool to be able to identify that and automatically convert that to a 2 decimal place version when it prints your dollar amount in words on your check. Copy company. This can be very, very helpful for organizations that have a lot of different companies in their system, or if they just have a need to set up a new company within GP. Where you specify, here's the source company, I've already built the database, here's the destination company. That destination one is probably pretty blank, but what we can do is say, you know what, copy over the chart of accounts, copy over my payable vendors, maybe it's my customers also, maybe it's some of the report options, so the default options I've got for some of the reports, where you can basically take a new company and have it set up and configured very similarly to one of your existing customers. If you've got some customer or employees in the system and they've set up some shortcuts for themselves that are helpful potentially to others. So they've got their system here. Maybe they've started setting up some shortcuts. Maybe you have a need to track multi-currency or something. Under shortcuts here, maybe they built an external connection, which isn't hard to do, kind of coming through here, add a web page or an external shortcut, and they've got this shortcut that goes right out and loads exchange rates in that they can reference every day. Maybe they've made a lot of report shortcuts or done a variety of things here that would be helpful to others. If that's the case, in this, with this shortcuts copy tool, you can select that individual and say, copy that to those shortcuts to others within your organization, that other GP users. So it can be very helpful. Then we get into, these are a little bit more technical type tools, and I'm not going to spend too much time on it. They're usually well beyond the average user's understanding, but just so that you know that they're there, there's one called the toolkit, comes up to this screen, that allows you to rebuild the index in this, which is really the index of your GL accounts in the system. So if something's not quite working right and you might be having some issues even with management reporter and things, you might have to rebuild that index. So it's usually a technical thing that needs to be done. It's easy to do it through this tool. The next option that's on there is allows you to recreate some of the other objects. So there's various procs within the system, other index, or recreating some of these tables. So very unusual, but that you'd be going here, but it can be powerful for those people that do need to use that capability. And this would be another one that's in the very technical type realm, usually for developers or people trying to figure out a little bit more on the system. They call it the menu inquiry utility. You're able to go on and navigate through here to any one of your menus, a transaction menu, inquiry cards, whatever. And then once you've said transactions, it could be which area, if it's sales transaction entry, or any one of the various pieces here, and it gives you technical information about it. Gee, is this a modified window? Is it coming from a different third party? Who might that be? Etc. Because sometimes, you know, as consultants or developers get in and start looking at a system, we're kind of wondering, what's up with this particular menu option or window, and this can give further technical information about that. Okay, just a couple more. System tools, update user date. Now you may have found that if you, best practice is to say when you're in GP at the end of the day, go ahead and log out of the system. Don't just leave yourself in. Don't, if you're connected to a server that or an application that's in the cloud, don't just disconnect. Be sure to log out or exit out of the system before you close out and stuff. If not, the next day you come in and you go into GP, or you're bringing up GP, you're finding there could be a dialog box there and says, hey, do you want to update your user date? Well, yep, I sure do. That's because that you didn't log out yesterday. And what this utility can be used for, if you're really doing this a lot and you don't, for some reason you want to stay in the system because you're running reports and things like that overnight, with this option you can say, go ahead and automatically update that user date at midnight. But then you need to take one extra step, and there's a file in the application folder called dex.ini, and you need to add an extra line into this so that even though it's updated the user date, you also have to suppress that dialog box from opening and again prompting you for to update that user date because the system already took care of it for you. That concludes the the review of those tools. I don't know if anybody has any questions out there further. A few of them came up while we were going, and I just incorporated it right in the flow as I was explaining some of this. But if you've if you think that you might have a further question you want to email me about, my email address is there, and contact phone number. Otherwise, Katie, did you have any other closing comments?
No, I think we're good. Thank you so much, Ron, for a great presentation. And thank you guys for being on the call with us today. You will get a copy of this recording again, I believe, tomorrow. So have a wonderful afternoon and a great weekend. Thanks.
Thank you.